from below, on top, in the middle. Yes, yes. So okay, let that be a lesson to everyone who has to hold a mic. And you don't hold it like that, you hold it like this. That's right. If you want to hold your head at the right angle, so I speak open. Maybe like this? Probably not. Okay, so hopefully the live stream has started. Today, you can feel my last night is in my voice. Today is Mesh Credit Day, and not to preempt what everyone's going to say, but to preempt it, I want to explain in just a few words what Mesh Credit is. And that means that everyone in the network says how much they trust their friends, and that creates a graph along which promises of payments can travel. And the interesting thing about Mesh Credit I should emerge is the pathfinding. How do you work out a path from the person who wants to pay to the person who wants to get paid? Because the graph itself is actually very similar to any payments graph. It's just a promises graph. So we've got some really super Mesh Credit experts in the audience, possibly the most informed and the most number of projects in any one of these mornings. So I hope that there'll be a good diversity of perspectives, and we'll get in a bit deep as to what are the structural and political consequences of Mesh Credit, and it will fill in our knowledge of different structures of credit throughout the week. Julio has organized this. I think you should be on the sofa throughout the morning, Julio. And I'm going to take Julio's seat and hand over control. And you can introduce Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
Because of the screen, we shouldn't sit here.
Yeah, okay. But maybe just for the beginning. Yeah. So welcome everyone. Thank you again, Matthew. So Matthew tasked me to organize the Mesh Credit Day, and I'm very happy to have done it. Maybe not in the best way possible, but I hope it's nice. So my name is Julio. I'm from the Circus Project, and I'm here also with Alex from Sicoba, from Kyle from My Chips, which is very both in the world of Mesh Credit, and also Michelle from Ledger Loops. So each of us will present during the day. So just to give you a sense of the whole day, Alex will start with some very nice introduction, definitions to get us started on terms. Then I will go speak a bit more in depth about Mesh Credit and a bit about value theory. And then we have a break, coffee break, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then Michelle will lead the session on technical challenges alongside the Bits Possessed Collective, and Kyle and Alex about different technical challenges within doing Mesh Credit. And then last we have Kyle giving us a really nice talk to finish, and then we have lunch. So that's the order of things for the day. And then for the afternoon, please remember to ask you for your sessions. I already hear that, for example, the Bits Possessed one proposed a session about their workers organization collective, how they organize as a tech collective. Also about anonymity in peer-to-peer credit networks is something that is also of interest. So if you have anything in mind, please put it and we vote. So, Alex, take it away.
Yep, thank you. Just putting up a timer. Okay. All right, so I have about 40 minutes to talk about money and credit. Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm involved in two projects. I'm doing a few other things also, but I'm involved in local currency in Luxembourg that I'm running the technical part of it, and also in a project called Sicoba, which is still under development. So here, what I want to do this morning is to do a crash course on money and credit. And you'll see it will be a crash course because we don't have much time. So first of all, it's going to be a bit technical because, you know, if you want to change the world, the system, you need to know what the system is. And here I just want to say that money it's just a tool. It's also this idea that, you know, you change the money system and everything else will change alongside. That's maybe not realistic, right? I mean, there is a world in which we could have the same banking system as today and it would be a fair world. It's possible, but probably if the world was fairer, the banking system would also change. Right? Now, second, technology is not always a solution, right? We've seen this yesterday. You know, the people in Guatemala have different needs than the people in a developed country. I can tell you that in France and in Paris, in Chinatown, there are extensive networks, credit networks that have a lot of transactions and they use paper, okay? And then also the fact that the underlying problem in a lot of this financial and the issues of inequality, etc., technology is not going to solve them because if people don't have bank accounts, the usual reason is because they don't have money. It's not because they don't have access to banking. I'll try and go a bit, yeah. Then there is, of course, the fact that money is deeply rooted in culture. That's important just to keep in mind because we have certain views of it. So here I'm just, you know, stating facts, you know, is accumulating money okay or not? That depends on the culture. Is it okay to be in debt or not? Depends on the culture. You know, in some cultures, being in debt is negative, and in others, it's more or less okay. The sovereign, the state, the king, whatever, are they structurally in debt or are they structurally creditors? Of course, in our world, they're structurally in debt. It wasn't always like that. And finally, is it okay for money to lose value over time or not? Most of people today don't accept it, but there was a time when this was quite naturally accepted. So what's money in practice? Let's just start with the basics, not in the theory. In practice, money is something that I can take to a shop, to a restaurant, to a business, and I'm sure before leaving house that it will be accepted. That's all it is, okay? It's something that's accepted. So, and then you can already from this, you can see, oh, is gold money? Well, not really. Most shops don't accept it. It's Bitcoin money, and not really in that sense, okay? So there's a practical things. And of course, then you've got little details like, you know, is a credit card money? Well, no, but credit card represents money, so it's a medium, okay? It's not the money itself. All right, let's move on. Now let's get to the actual sort of definitions that are a bit more precise, okay? So first, we need to define what we're talking about. So I hereby declare that I'm going to talk about commercial money, money for business, okay? So commercial money is not social currency, is not ceremonial currency, and is not also kudos currency, which I'm not even going to define. Social currencies, kudos currencies, these are very interesting, important things, and they may be related to the future of money, right? But this is not the subject. We're going to talk about commercial money here, okay? And money, just to say it now, is not currency. It's not the same. So, definitions. So this is not money. These are social currencies. When people say the rice stones on this island are money, well, they're not. They're not used for buying stuff. They're used for social interactions, right? Wampum, it's not money. It's a social thing, right? Maybe ceremonial to some extent. Okay, so now that we focus on commercial stuff, let's first define money things. So money things are physical things that represent, you know, by some social convention, represent some standardized value. So we have, you know, cowrie shells, a measure of grain in Mesopotamia or stuff like that. I mean, this stuff you can touch. Okay, the value is in the thing itself. You can take that thing and go to the market and exchange it. Very simple. And then money tokens are promises of money things initially, because very quickly in history, they just become promises of sort of abstract money things. But let's just distinguish money things and money tokens, okay? And money token is something much more complex because it's more of a contract. So there's a physical form, right? Or not, because, you know, entering the bank ledger, well, it's a kind of physical form. It has an issuer. It refers to a currency. It has an amount, and it has potentially terms, right? If you look at bractates in the 12th to the 14th century in Germany, right? They were declining in value. There was a social contract that, you had five coins, and once a year they would be called in, and you went in with 5 coins, and you got 4 in exchange, right? These were the terms of that particular kind of money. Okay, so and then these money tokens, they need to be expressed in a currency, and the currencies very quickly went from material to abstract. So what's a material currency? It's a shekel of silver. So you can have a money token from a temple or bank in Mesopotamia, in Babylon, saying this is good for 1 shekel, right? It could have been, maybe it's a clay tablet, right? But it represents an actual shekel of silver, okay? Then the Hittites, take over, they invade, they take all the silver, and you still have the clay tablet saying it's 1 shekel it's 1 shekel. There is no silver, but it still refers to silver that isn't there. So that's the first level of abstract currency. And today, in Israel, we have shekels. There's no silver in sight, right? That's simply an abstract currency, same as a euro or dollar. So the thing is that today, and actually throughout most of history, that's what money was. There were money tokens referring to some abstract currency that usually had only a very tenuous link to anything material. So, for example, the Roman denarius, which was initially a silver coin, by the 3rd century, it was actually made completely of copper, but it was still called silver in just usual everyday, vocabulary. So now we come to the, I would say, kind of generic definition of money. So it's a particular kind of debt, right, which is a generally, transferable, acceptable kind of debt. And when we say debt, really we should also think promise, right? Because then you get into these discussions: is government issued money debt? Well, it's a kind of debt. It's a promise to tax. So yeah, in case a bank issues money that's indeed a debt, or bank, or some institution. When it's the government, it's more like a promise to tax. But bear with me, we only have 40 minutes and we have only half an hour left. So I'll take some shortcuts during this presentation. And of course, as we probably all know, today almost all money is created by banks, and money is basically equivalent to bank IOUs, right? Here I'll also say in passing, because there are people out there who think that gold is money or that. So first thing is that gold, the idea of gold standard, is a modern invention. Didn't really exist in antiquity. I would say somewhere between the 16th and 20th century. Okay, some countries implemented it. It sometimes worked, sometimes it had negative side effects, but okay. What's important to realize that even when there was a gold standard, most money was still credit, right? Most money was still credit to bank credit, or credit to what was merchant. So that's just how that's a fact. Therefore, that's why when I see or when I hear the credit theory of money, well, I don't like this word. It's not a theory; it's a reality for most of history. I mean, yeah. Then there is, I must, actually, sorry, I didn't bring this book. So there are books out there. There's the little yellow books, and you're free to take them, as, there's probably not enough for everyone. So there's some book, this yellow book, which includes text by Michel Innes, which I think are quite interesting and somewhat important. So Michel Innes has a very modern definition of money, and he says simply credit, and credit alone is money. Okay, and again, this is, it's of course a simplification, but it's pretty good simplification. So now I'll just run through some money myths, which I had these ready, so let me just go through them. So money is in the eye of the beholder, and we still have this sometimes when we say, well, we don't really know what it is. I think this, you think that, and our opinions are equivalent. They're not. I mean, we know what it is by now. Okay, it's fine. We know what money is. Then I think that one everyone sort of knows about. Yeah, credit came first. I mean, there is, again, you can discuss stuff on some very basic level. There are societies which engage in barter, but you couldn't even call it economy. That's in subsistence economies, you can have barter. But as soon as you have a real economy, in the way that we see it, yeah, you can't have barter. I think no one has ever seen an economy, a real sort of proper economy with barter. Coins were the first form of money, but it's pretty obvious. We know that wasn't the case, and we actually don't know in Mesopotamia, how did these guys pay? How did the housewife go and buy her stuff? We don't know this. We haven't found little pieces of silver. We just don't know. And we must assume that it was all just written down somewhere and recorded and just done on credit. We don't have any other explanation. Right, the value of coins was determined by metal, obviously not. So the metal was an indicator of the value. It's like a golden Rolex is worth more than a metal Rolex, yeah? But gold that makes the value of a gold Rolex, yeah? So that's also a fact. Then there's another myth, and this one is quite pervasive, actually, that because of interest rates, the volume of money somehow has to necessarily increase over time. And we'll actually see that this is, I'll try and show that this is not the case. Money is created by central banks. Well, wait, I think we know that, hopefully. We have a fractional reserve system. This is fascinating. A few years ago, Christine Lagarde went to speak in London before the board of the Bank of England, and she basically was saying, yes, as we all know, we have a fractional reserve system, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's... we are in safe hands. and we need central banks. Well, I think you guys don't need to know that. Now here, this shouldn't be really completely read, but here I'm going to just say something about these three functions of me. So first of all, a store of value. To this I would say yes, but maybe I should say yes and. But yes, but as we'll see, to retain its value, money has to be spent. We'll see that. Unit of account, no, because money is expressed in a unit of account. It is not itself a unit of account, obviously. Medium of exchange, yes and. Sort of, but the real function of money is, when you really pay, it's really a medium of payment, because when you pay, debts are cancelled. If you just exchange, no debt cancelled, so you can exchange money indeed, but where money is really, the real function is payment, because payment cancels debt. And one of the important things, and I'm not sure we'll see this here, but I have a slide about this. When you ask about, money or monetary system or something, the first question you ask, because issuance is always easy. How does something, a token, money or something get created? Usually people have some pretty good ideas about this. The first question you ask, okay, how does it get destroyed? Yeah. If you don't get a good answer, then you just forget it. It has to be essential. And when you talk, again, I don't think I have a slide for this, but I'll mention it now. When you look at things like this social currencies, right, wampum, or things that, let's say, someone during their life accumulated some tokens of respect because they did stuff. In many of these societies, when that person died, these tokens, and they could be very valuable. It could be, with gold or something. They were put in the grave with the body, right? That was the destruction part. Because imagine if all the tokens of respect that a person got, his children retained, it would accumulate to a way that wouldn't be reasonable, right? So in many societies, you had this method where the riches of a person that a person accumulated were actually buried with him. Yeah, and then you could close the loop. You didn't have this accumulation. Right. We continue. Okay, that's, I guess, as the facts. I think we're moving now to the facts. Right. So for every money unit of money there is a corresponding debt or promise, which of course points, to the underlying tension in our system, in our society. Everyone wants to get rich, okay? But no one wants to be a debtor, but you can't have the one without the other. It's a bit of a problem. And so here we've sort of solved the problem somehow. We could solve it by taking some, like, the big debt would be the state. And we would all be rich and the state would all owe us money, but then we'd have to remember that the state is us, etc. Okay. So it's money cannot be owned. So that's again one of these criteria. You say, is gold money? Well, can it be owned? Yes, so it's not money. Is Bitcoin money? Well, same conclusion, etc. Because money is a contract, right? That's then money can only, I already said that, can only keep its value if it's spent. It's generally borrowed in order to be repaid. I mean, that's a kind of obvious thing. I just put it in here because there are some debtors which are sort of tricking the system. Some, let's say, typically these will be governments who don't always borrow to repay. I mean, a normal company, a normal person borrows money with the intent of working, of producing, of doing stuff for others, and thereby repaying the loan, okay, the debt. Whereas, well, governments are able to cheat, right? Which is a problem, potentially. Okay, so now we're going to move on, and so far I'm good on time. To credit, and Matthew already introduced, the concept of mesh credit, and I just want to say here that, for me, mesh credit, I mean, it's a nice word. I like it. It's good to use it. But for me, mesh credit is mesh credit. That's what credit is. It's unconstrained credit. When you go from mesh credit to, for example, what's the other version? The mutual credit, yes. You add constraints, right? You say, well, if I go to a mutual credit system, I have to accept certain constraints. It can be a free decision. But once you join a mutual credit system, you cannot just decide, oh, I don't trust this person. No, you're obliged to do it. So you get constraints. Whereas mesh credit is unconstrained credit. And so you've got two important mechanisms here. One is credit acceptance. That's it. The fact that everyone, every actor, every person, company, decide whom they trust, right? Again, I'm just going through what Matthew already said. Freely and on what terms, because in real world it's not just, oh, I trust him up to 10 euros, 100 euros, €1 million. It's also, well, do I give him this for free? Will there be an interest rate, etc.? I mean, that's the reality. The second is credit conversion, and this is important for this to work. So credit conversion means that am I sort of prepared to be an intermediary between two people who may not trust each other, right? And if the nodes, the participants in a mesh credit network do not engage, not agree to do lots of credit conversion, the system will not function as well. In fact, it won't function very well at all, right? So here there's a couple of slides about credit conversion. It's very, very simple. We've got a buyer who wants to buy a car, and let's say that person goes to the car dealer and says, hey, I want this car for now 20,000 euros. So dealer said, well, how do you want to pay? Well, here's my IOU. I owe you 20,000, and I'm good for it. I'll come back in a couple of months and pay you. Well, that's probably not going to work. Okay, so the buyer then goes to the bank and asks for, in case they don't have the cash, ask for a loan, and the result of a loan is that now the buyer owes the bank 100. Let's say it's not 20,000, it's 100, and the bank owes the buyer 100 also. And it's like, yeah, 100, they're even. But of course, these two sort of IOUs have vastly different characteristics. The bank IOU is money, whereas the buyer's IOU is something much more. Has a much more lower credit, which is why the bank charges money for credit conversion. And now with the 100, with the money that the bank or the IOU of the bank the buyer can go to the car dealer and say, hey, here's an IOU from the bank. And the car dealer will say, oh, that's an IOU for a bank. You can think of it, it's the buyer's IOU with a stamp that the bank put on at a fee that now the car dealer will accept. So it's really simple stuff. And of course, you could then have a situation where, let's say, the son of a person, like a student, wants to buy a car, then there'll be two credit conversions, because then the student would need, let's say, the okay from the parent. So you'd convert the credit of the student to the credit of the parent. Then the bank would convert the credit from the parent to its credit, and that then would be used to buy the car, right? So it can be stages of credit conversion. Let me just stop here for a second and see if there's any questions. Fantastic. Everyone. So, yeah, so that's when the buyer gets the car, and now the bank owes the trader the money. Right, and now we come to the credit cycle, and I'd like to go through this because I think it's important. So my first comment here, I'm going to use somewhat non-standard vocabulary maybe, because people have this idea of capitalists. You know, who's the capitalist? Is this rich guy, you know, big house, you know, buying a big car. And so that's what I thought. And then I came to sort of a moment of realization. It's a personal story where I had this, you know, this company there, this capitalist who going to the bank every morning, like physically, you know, he would this guy lived within a few hundred meters of my parents' house, and my father noticed that this guy was going to the bank every morning. I was saying, oh, this guy must be rich. Yeah? And then he went bankrupt. So that's where I realized maybe he wasn't going to the bank every morning because he was rich, because he was waiting to be paid. And he was like, am I finally going to getting my money so I can pay my workers? So for me, a capitalist is someone who is in debt. Once a capitalist got rich, he's not a capitalist anymore. He's just a rich guy. Right? So here we have a capitalist who has some idea, an entrepreneur. But of course, he's poor. So what does he do? He goes to a bank. There's a very simple situation where, let's imagine, of course, there's just one bank. There's a community of people, and you've got an entrepreneur who's got this great idea to create some widgets, to make some widgets. He convinces the banker and gets a loan. And now, with these bank IOUs, he can hire people, buy stuff, and, you know, produce. So after a while, you know, he spent 50 of his credit. Now these 50 is, of course, the debt of the bank to the people. And, well, as you notice from 100 people, and, well, as you notice from 100, now he owes the bank 105 because there is interest. And after a while, okay, let's say he now owes the bank 110 because, again, there was interest. He still has 10 left. He's paid 90, and he's got some widgets, some goods that he wants to sell in the market. So let's see how this pans out. Let's say he actually is able to sell these goods at a good price. Yeah. And now the people who have spent more money than they had, they owe money to the bank. And he sold goods for 120. He, you know, repays his loan. He's got 10 left. People owe the bank 20. The banker is happy because he's also made a profit. Fantastic. So that's one scenario. Okay, possible. Another is everything is gone. You know, because the banker also bought a widget, right, with the interest rate, the 10% to 10 units of interest. He bought some stuff. And it's at least possible that this ends up at zero for everyone. And there was an interest rate. It's gone. There. Do you see one? Do you see any money left? No. So that basically, it's not even a proof. It's evident that just because there's an interest rate, you don't have to have more money at the end of the cycle, right? And then let's take another scenario. The capitalist goes to market, right? And the people who have the money, they look at these goods and they say, nah, we don't want them. We don't like them. Okay. So the capitalist, in a rage, he just throws them into the river. I didn't say, oh, I said he, but, you know, it is a generic he. Yes, it could. Yeah. So, of course, now he's broke. And, of course, now that the capitalist doesn't have any goods and still owes money to the bank, Well, I mean, the bank doesn't have much assets now, does it? The bank is broke. And the people have no more money. So by not spending the money became worthless. And that's what I mean by, in order to retain value, money has to be spent. If it's not spent at the right time, it just, okay, loses value. And this kind of stuff, is happening, of course, like zillions of times in an economy. Right? Overall, it sort of works, but money has to be spent. Money that doesn't get spent creates a kind of, it's like in a body, blood has to circulate. If you don't have good circulation, you get blood stasis, which can be mortal, right? It's dangerous. In an economy, when the money accumulates, okay, too much, you have stasis also. And that's what we have. I mean, in a society where we have these, zillionaires who have all this money, control all the money, that is the equivalent of blood stasis in a body. Okay, it's probably not good, and we can feel the consequences. Right. So that's the conclusion. Now, there's a couple more general statements. Already talked about the government, and this is a quote by Mitchell Innes. The more government money there is, in circulation, the poorer we are. This is just to say that when the government has lots of debts, of course, someone holds these debts as assets and they feel rich, right? But although in reality, society as a whole isn't richer by that, okay? So this is just, okay, it's just that as a nice quote. And linked to that, again, just to keep the context. So there is, productive money. When companies borrow or issue money, it doesn't really matter whether it's going through a bank or through a mutual credit system or whatever, right? If you do this with the intent of providing value, that is productive money, because it's going to end up with production and services, and it's going to be cancelled in a natural circuit. Whereas if that money originates from the public sector, to an extent it can be okay, but if it's too much, okay, it can overwhelm the system, okay? So it's what I call unproductive money. Right, so now we come, for the last 10 minutes or so, to Sycoba. So I'm just going to give a few examples, because I'm involved in a local currency in Luxembourg, but I'm not going to talk about that because there's nothing special about it. So Sycoba is a project, it's an IOU system, which is still under development. It has its ups and downs, and one of the reason why it's taken us a long time, and it's still taking us a long time to do, is because we wanted to do something very generic and something that is an IOU system for business. So what does it mean? First of all, when you look at payment paths in our system, it's not like, oh, can it find a path? No, it's going to find paths for different time horizons, and these different paths for different time horizons are going to have different costs. And so the buyer, okay, the person who wants to buy something, can then choose, do I want to pay, let's say, interest-free, and my debt will be due in 15 days? Am I prepared to pay a 1% interest, but I'll have 30 days to pay? Or am I prepared to pay even more for a 60-day or 90-day delay? Okay, so it's a choice that the system gives you. That's the first thing. The second thing is that in our system, the goal of clearing is to reduce costs. And so clearing, it can actually increase them. And so that's what I wanted to show very simply. So let's say you've got a credit line from A to B, yeah, subject to some whatever interest rate, and there's 100 here. A debt of an IOU of 100. C enters the picture. Okay. B grants C a credit line. C grants A a credit line. And these would be at 0% free credit lines. So as soon as this happens, yeah, in our design, this gets replaced by this, because it's cheaper for A. Okay? But then what could happen in reality is that if these credit lines exist, when A makes a transaction, this here, maybe there is an interest rate, but this could be 60 days. Whereas these could be lines at 30 days. So in fact, A could then say, oh, I want it at 60 days. Because even though I pay a bit more, I know that my cash flow situation, I'll have cash in 60 days, but in 30 days, I'm not sure. So the system still wants to give you this option, okay, of choosing this instead of the cheaper version, okay? So that's, and of course, during the clearing, when the clearing happens, the clearing has to take into account what A wants, okay? So A has, at the time of transaction, declared its payment target, its ideal payment target. All right. And then there is something that is maybe also try and explain the transitivity, the rippling. So in our system, you don't necessarily have rippling in the classic way. So let me explain this. Like this. Let's see. Maybe let's make a pretty extreme example. Okay. CD. Okay. And let's say we've got this very long chain of credit lines, and there is some interest rate here, yeah? And for some reason, it's an extreme example, maybe not happen often, but for some reason that this is, a possible and inexpensive, payment path that actually fits A's requirements, right? Now, when A does a transaction, A is liable for the credit line between C and D, for the interest between C and D, without even knowing who they are. B grants a credit line to A, C grants a credit line to B, etc. So this means that payments are possible. An arrow like this means A can pay B, which means that A has granted a credit line to A, etc. Yeah. So in this case, if a payment happens, yeah, A will be liable for interest payments between two parties whom they may not even know, right? And this has to be, and then what's the other complexity in this is that there's another party, G, may do a transaction that cancels out this thing here, and suddenly A doesn't have to pay this interest again. Maybe after a few days, the interest, this liability is gone because of someone else, okay? So that's just to give you a bit of an idea of the complexities that we have been dealing with in our system to make it really close to reality, to real business, okay? Oh, it does. No, A prepays the whole cost, but then may get some of it back. A number. Well, here's 100. Well, that's this. I hope this is a kind of, let's say there's a payment of 100. So now by paying 100 here, A actually, there is this, these are the RUs, but A actually has, has paid basically 100. Okay, A pays. A is the one that the party that wants to pay. Right. So, right. So A here there'll be an extra plus epsilon. This will be added at the beginning, plus 5. I know plus 5. Okay. And this 5 is the what C is expected to pay here.
But A doesn't know that there will be some interest between C and
No,
D
no.
ahead of time.
A only sees this transaction costs me so much. A just sees, okay, I want to pay 100, but in fact it's going to cost me 105.
On what basis?
On the basis of this interest rate here.
Which means that the information is propagating backwards. Otherwise, you don't know.
If you want to put it in these terms, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, but A doesn't need to know why it pays more. It just sees it's that, and if it accepts it, the terms, because there are no others, for example, it says, okay, I'm fine with that because I can't find another way. And then, but this 100, which becomes actually 1.5 here. You're right that it's good to have this example, and this one also is 1.5. Another transaction can then reduce this later. It's like you were lucky, you thought you were paying 105, but because something happened in the system, you get a reimbursement. Your debt gets reduced because stuff happens. Like in clearing. In clearing, the first example we had, someone's paying an interest, and something happens, and it's like, hey, you're lucky. These are all predetermined. These are not. These are not done. I mean, these guys are offline. All of these credit lines and the conditions are determined beforehand, right? You don't, you don't, these guys are not online. They don't have to decide anything at the moment of the transaction. They have created credit lines and terms beforehand. And they have, of course, allowed for credit conversion. Because here, B, C, D, and E must have allowed for credit conversion for this to work, right? That's why also credit conversion is so important, right? If people don't allow for credit conversion, well, but that's the case for all mesh systems.
So what happens is A expresses the intention to pay F.
Yes.
The algorithm does its magic and it says to A, there are these payment options with these prices.
Yeah.
Which one do you want?
Yes. And of course, the algorithm will, the idea is that if, for example, there are at 90 days, there are different prices, it will only show the cheapest one, right? But at different time horizons, it will show different prices because logically, the further you go in the future, the more expensive it should be in a normal system. Yes. Okay.
So hang on, I mean, I understand all of this, but the interest rate is dependent on paying in the future.
Yeah.
Right. If A has in fact paid immediately, then they don't incur that interest. So the rebate is not going to exist unless they haven't paid yet. There's sort of either you pay now, including the 5% interest, but then why did you bother? Because you didn't get your 90 days.
This is an okay. What isn't said here? There is, for example, this is 90 days. So all of these are going to be 90 days.
I absolutely understand that. But then when G does their transaction within those 90 days, that happens before A actually has to settle. So they don't get a cashback. They just suddenly don't have to pay the 5% that they thought they were liable for.
Right. So here, there's another concept. Well, the thing is that if here it is about clearing IOUs with different maturities. So if you were only able to clear IOUs with exactly the same maturities, you'll be back to the banking system. Because in our banking system, if I owe the bank something, let's say for payment tomorrow, and the bank owes me something for payment the day after tomorrow, then I'm technically bankrupt if I can't pay tomorrow, right? But in a mesh credit system, if you introduce time sort of targets, so these you need to have some flexibility in clearing. So we need to have a clearing flexibility between these time horizons or the time targets, which can be in our system defined by the user, but there's a minimum of 15 days, right? So things that are close can be cleared away even if they're not exactly matching, right? So things you can clear something at 90 days before, and this particular credit line here could, for example, not be for 90 days. It could be something where you say, well, I can go up to 90, but I'm fine to be, cleared, before, right? So the 90 is a time target, but it's something which is, it's not like, again, not in banking. In banking, 90 days means 90 days. So if you have a debt of 90 days at the bank, normally you go to the bank tomorrow and say, can I repay this debt now? The bank will essentially say no, but either will say, well, just pay the whole thing with interest. Yeah, but in our system, you can't do that because you want to be flexible.
Can I try and summarize? I think what you said is that in the banking system, the speed of propagation is infinite and everything has to be synced. Whereas in your system, you're allowing for different time horizons, which implies the possibility of information propagating back and forth in the system in order to adjust as things change. So it's
So
interesting because
there's two things. So the let's say 90 days doesn't mean exactly 90 days. It means up to 90 days
of course.
first.
Yeah.
And that's one. And the second is that something with 90 days and something with 80 days can clear, which you can't do in the banking system. So it's two things.
Right. So you're adding degrees of freedom, which
Yes.
allows for more flexibility and more
Exactly.
opportunity to optimize the overall system. That's interesting.
Then the implication of that is that, in fact, you will only know, because of this sort of cashbacky thing, you'll actually participate in the system. You'll pay for your stuff when you pay for your stuff, and you'll get a notice every now and then saying, these were the fees you incurred for having done these payments. And you won't know in advance exactly. You'll know the maximum that they could have been.
Exactly.
And then then you'll just judge, is this a cheaper system to participate in than using Credit Suisse, UBS?
Yeah, you're right. You know the worst case. So all that can happen is that you can get stuff back. So
Can I ask a question about the previous drawing? Yeah. Because you said I was curious about you're going to tell us why the amount of money in circulation doesn't increase due to interest. This is not it.
No,
No, that was before. There was another. Oh, there was a slide, I think. Anyway,
there was a slide.
yeah, right, with the capitalist.
I'm not saying it doesn't. There are cases when it doesn't. So I would say in a natural, in a good system, it shouldn't, because the productivity, the value added, absorbs the interest. Of course, there are many cases where it does. Of course, when you just buy for speculation or for other reasons.
So what you're saying is that the amount of money does increase, but so does the amount of goods that exist because of the productivity that happens.
No, the goods, they absorb the extra money. That's what I'm saying. You can get to a situation where the goods and value added and services absorb the interest and it's gone. It's not like you've got more money at the end and more stuff. No, you've repaid the money, you've repaid the interest, and we're done.
I thought that was also how inflation was explained. Like that.
Inflation is something else. Inflation, you've got more money over time for
exactly.
other reasons, because the extra money doesn't get absorbed. Inflation is when this absorption doesn't happen. That's when you have inflation. What I was trying to say is that it's not like absolutely necessary for interest to always mean growth of the monetary, the amount of money. That's all I want to say. Okay, so let's see. So here, conclusion, and I'm almost good here. So I'm going to be very brief. So people say, oh, money gets created out of thin air. And what I'm saying is, yeah, it should. That's how it should be. It's good to be created out of thin air, because if you had to depend on some commodities, they'll say, well, I want to do this stuff, but shit, I don't have gold. I mean, it's absurd, right? I mean, you want to do stuff if you have, if people have talent, they have some ideas, they should be able to do them without having to rely on something like gold, which is not needed for that, okay? And there is we just very quickly get some bonus material here. An ecological argument against the gold standard, very, very brief. The fact is that to have a gold standard, you have to vastly overvalue the gold in the system. You cannot have it at market price. So gold has to be set at a much higher than market price. As a result, people will start digging up gold, which happened in 1934. As a result, you have a lot of pollution happening, because gold mining is the second biggest polluter of all the mining system. I mean, it's a huge polluter, right? So for ecological reasons, people shouldn't be. So that's, if you want to convince someone to not, go for the gold standard, there is this really good ecological argument for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it should be in your email. So, will you please stand up? So I want us to shake a bit the structures of money we have within our bodies. Where do you feel it? Yeah. Give a big ah. Thank you so much, and thank you, Alex, again for your presentation. I'm gonna try to go with mine a bit faster because of time, so we can have space for everyone to speak. So I did this yesterday night, very late at night after talking to a lot of you. So it's inspired by this. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I call it credit structures and value theory. So I can you give me next slide? I want to start. We talked about definitions, but I think it would be nice to start with a quote by one of my favorite philosophers, the Drunks. He used to say that, if you want to catch fish, you need a trap, and once you have the fish, you can get rid of the trap. It's the same with a rabbit. If you want to catch a rabbit, you get a snare, and once you have the rabbit, you can get rid of the snare. And likewise, words exist because of meaning. But once we have the meaning of things, we can get rid of the words. So what is important for me today is to talk a bit about the meaning of what just credit, but in this case, mesh credit is. And of course, there aren't any formal definitions to it because they're all very meshy. So I just wanted to say that off the back. Next slide, please. Then to try to give a bit of a sense of, just to recap also what has been said by Matthew and Alex, you can think about a mesh credit as a distributed credit network. It's a peer-to-peer network. It enables people to settle obligations with participants in the network without some sort of central authority. So people are the issuers. Maybe going back to what was being spoken of yesterday, I think in a mesh credit setting, people are the ones who are claiming the power to issue promises into being. So in a mesh credit network, people acts as both a lender and a borrower, if you want. And so there is this sort of, this enmeshedness means that it's just basically a reflection of the interconnectedness of what any economy is like, right? Between people, where people are the ones issuing the IOUs. And because of the flexibility of the topology of mesh credits, you can have a lot of very interesting strategies of how you want to deploy them. So in the case of Alex, he explained with the time, different maturities and so on. Also with circles, as I'll explain later, with the basic income system we run, it's based on a mesh credit. Next one. So here are your favorite friends. I won't go so deeply into it because you already know it. So there's Carol, Alex, and Bob. This is an example of the circle system. In the circle system, trust flows in the opposite direction as money, where you only accept currency or tokens, IOUs, from the people who you trust directly. But you can send payments down to anyone in the network, rippling the other way around. Next one. So in that case, here the payment is being settled directly through the chain. So Dave is now coming in, giving tokens to Carol. Carol sends her tokens to Alice, and Alice does to Bob. And the trust is from Bob to Alice, Alice to Carol, Carol to Dave. Next one. And then there's also, because of this, the topology of trust, where you only accept tokens from people you trust. If there are fake accounts, if there are what, in the Web3 world, crypto world, people call Sybil attacks, you have the possibility of preventing contagion of risk. If you think of trust as counterparty risk, then the ability to only trust and receive tokens from the people you trust prevents the sort of contagion in case there is an attack from whatever. Next one. So this is a picture of, on the left, you have the transaction network of the Circle's UBI system. This is from July 2021. And on the other hand, you see the topology of the trust network, which you see it's a bit more fractal-esque. No? So as people join, they start to trust each other, and sort of more and more communities start to emerge.
Where is that?
This is in Circles in Berlin, in the world. So this is from 2021. I think at the time we had about 1,000 something, but But I'll get into numbers later. Yeah. So next one, I just wanted to show first the structure. So there was a question about where are the sort of blurry lines between mutual and mesh credit, and I wanted to maybe give some initial insights and also see what you think about it. I think the thing about mesh credit is that it's translocal, so it's hyper local, but it's potentially global. So maybe going back to what Tomasz was saying yesterday, where we're thinking about hyper local communities, but actually we live in a globalized, the liberal economy. Actually, what connects things in the mesh credit is trust. So you can trust anyone. Like I trust people in Guatemala, I trust people in Berlin, I trust people in Taiwan, and those are relationships. And I think that is really sort of a nice thing to think about in terms of proximity of how how you are. So it's also potentially scale free, which is another way of thinking about it. It's if you think in terms of graphs as a multi-directional graphs, if people have the ability to trust each other without having to be trust back, you can have basically any type of topology. There's also the rippling effect that Alex mentioned. Wait, just one more. And the transitivity to trust explained. So who here knows the Pope? You know the Pope? Okay, yeah. I know who he is. Okay. I was like, whoa. Who knows someone who knows the Pope? Okay, we have two people. Okay, who knows someone who knows someone who knows the Pope? Okay. So this is how mesh credit works. Next one, please. Exactly. Could you press the link, please? So I wanted to maybe just kind of compare a bit. So. Yeah. So this is a movie based on a book by Richard Werner that Pepe mentioned yesterday called Princess of the Yen. Very good book. You should read it. This specific section, what I want to show here is how the Japanese central bank after Second World War was managing credit creation before the rise of neoliberalism, and how basically Japan went from war zone to like creating like most of the digital technologies that we use today. And it was managed through central bank and what it's called window guidance or credit window guidance.